Okay. Hello, can everybody hear me all right? Hi. All right, is that good? I feel like it's, how about in the back? Does that sound all right? Okay, cool. Hi, I'm CAROLYN KUEBLER. I'm the editor of the New England Review, and I'm thrilled to see a full room of people enjoying Mexican food and the firelight. And Bill Murray. So thanks so much for coming out. It's really great to see you. We have a few thanks first before we get started with the reading. I want to thank all the people here at the Marquis for welcoming this literary event here in their space. There are Thomas, Justin, and Ben. They've been super helpful and very welcoming, and they'll even turn off the fire if we want them to turn it off. So I want a show of hands. Who says we should keep the fire and who says we should turn it off? Keep the fire? Okay. We'll keep the fire. Nice. Okay. And also, I want to thank the rest of the New England Review people who are here. We have Marcy Parlow, Eli Sutton, Janice Obahowski over here, Alicia Romero right here. She's a reader of, that's your name, right? Okay. She's a reader of fiction manuscripts. Meadow Osmond also reads manuscripts. And special guest we have from all the way from Elliott, Maine, is Evgenia Dame, right over here. She's been reading for New England Review for 4 years, and this is the first time we've met her. She came up here for this event, so we're really happy to have her here. Thanks also to our co-sponsors, the Breadloaf Writers Conferences and the Vermont Bookshop. Meadow here is from the Vermont Bookshop selling books. She has Jodi Paloni's, it's a long title, They Could Live With Themselves. And then she also has Ben Pease's Chateau Witchman. So please go check those books out. And she also has a broadside now. Didi Jackson brought this gorgeous broadside of one of her poems. And of course, there are copies of the current New England Review on the table, as well as the previous issue. So when you're all finished with this, you'll want more, I'm sure. So go up to her table and Meadow will help you out. So thank you to all of them. Oh, and MCTV, we have a television camera here. They are going to probably put it up tomorrow or maybe later. But if any of your friends are so sad they couldn't come, they can probably see it on television. What channel is it? Is there a number to channel? Does it work like that anymore?
We're on, I think, 9 and 15 on cable, but we're also on YouTube, and we also have a website.
Cool. There you go. So you can tell your friends that didn't make it. So thanks to all of them. And of course, thanks to all of our authors. I'm going to introduce them all 4 of them right here at the beginning, and then they'll come up one by one and read their work without any further interruptions from me. So reading first tonight is Layla Santos. Layla is a current Middlebury student from the class of 2018. That's very soon. She's a political science major. She's raised in the Bronx and Portchester, New York, and is also a writer of fiction. I asked all the writers for tonight a little bit about their movie preferences before they came, because I thought, well, we're reading in a movie theater, and this might be a good way to get to know them a little bit, and I did find out some interesting things. I found out that Layla's favorite movie, at the moment anyway, is Volver by Pedro Almodovar, starring Penelope Cruz. And her favorite movie actor is probably Tom Hanks. If her own writing were a movie, it would probably be some kind of a cross between Spanglish and Lady Bird. So this is going to be good. Next, followed by Layla, will be followed by Ben Pease, over here with the child. He actually has made a few short movies of his own, which you can find on YouTube. And they go along with, or maybe they're an expansion of, his book of poetry over there, the Chateau Witchman, which the subtitle is A Blockbuster in Verse. So here he is reading in a movie theater, which makes a lot of sense. He describes the book, though, as a mashup among Altered States, The Truman Show, and Oedipus at Colonus. As you can see from the photo on our poster, he's got a young baby. Actually, you don't even need a poster. She's right here. He's got a young baby. He doesn't watch a lot of movies, not all the way through, not anymore. Though he has seen Moana and Paddington. And in terms of a favorite movie, he often finds himself thinking about, I like that way of putting it, he finds himself thinking about Krzysztof Kieślowski's Three Colors trilogy. And to take the film conversation just another step further, I want to point out that a book that he's working on right now is called Fugitives of Speech. He describes as an epic poem following teenage filmmakers in Ludlow, Massachusetts. He's also a board member of the Ruth Stone Foundation and is leading the renovations of Ruth Stone's property in Goshen, Vermont. After Ben will be Jodi Paloni. She will read third. She says that if her book were a movie, it would be a slightly darker, small-town version of Love Actually, a series of connected stories by characters in place, but without the tidy tie-ups at the end, and without all those movie stars. Her favorite film of the moment is Maudie, which is based on the life of outsider artist Maud Lewis, is set in Nova Scotia, and features Sally Hawkins as the artist and Ethan Hawke as a surly fish peddler. Her collection of short stories is called They Could Live With Themselves. Came out in 2016, was a finalist for the Maine Book Award. Jodi also teaches, writes, edits, and serves on the planning committee for the Brattleboro Literary Festival. So, last up will be Didi Jackson. Her debut collection of poems, The Killing Jar, will be out next season from Red Hen Press, where you can read her work in print now. It is in the current issue of the New England Review. She has a poem called The Burning Bush. She's also currently featured on our website in our NER digital series with a piece about Brancusi's sculpture, Bird in Flight. And so before I found out what her favorite movie is, I was like, well, I have to make something up because I didn't know. So I found out that there's actually going to be a movie about Brancusi coming out supposedly this year, directed by Peter Greenaway, called Walking to Paris. And this is supposed to be about when Brancusi walked from Bucharest to Paris in a year in preparation for becoming the 20th century's most important sculptor. But that's not her favorite movie. She told me later that a movie that stuck with her recently was The Magdalene Sisters, and she also loved Maudie. That's 2 for Maudie. Also, she has a guilty pleasure, which is horror movies. Her forthcoming book would be, she says, a little bit What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams for the theme of suicide, and Under the Tuscan Sun, quite a different theme, of new love. So, also about Didi, she's published poems in other magazines besides the New England Review. There's a magazine called The New Yorker, there's one called Plowshares, and The Comet, and she is associate poetry editor at Green Mountains Review. So that's all from me for now, so please give a very warm welcome to Layla Santos.
Like this? Okay. Hi, I'm Layla. I'm a senior, so that means I'm more or less finishing up my last semester at the college. And I don't have that much experience reading out loud, so bear with me. I wanted to read a story that I started working on last semester, and I've since edited and shortened it down to read it here tonight. And it's told through a series of 8 short vignettes. And I guess in writing the story, I really wanted to capture the essence of neighborhoods that I've lived in, but more specifically, a block and a building that defined my childhood and also was a home to my grandparents and my parents for decades. And that was part of what I wanted to do with the story, was to kind of build a neighborhood that created a character of this town, or not town, but of this block. But I also wanted to write a story about a girl in a sort of coming-of-age way, but not quite like that. And if anyone's curious, the neighborhood that it's mostly based on is a neighborhood in New York City, Inwood. So I'll read now. Ooh. Let me fix this first. Su cuerpo. 1. Lynette's father stayed just under the doorway, but she wouldn't turn around. She thought he was crying. Everything was almost the same. The furniture was still brown and bound in its thick layer of plastic, but the plants that used to crowd against the living room windows, cover the end tables, and hang from the ceiling were gone. Now more sunlight entered the room than Lynette thought possible. The space was overexposed. It had been almost a full year since her grandmother had passed. No relatives had visited since, aside from Lynette's grandfather. Even he had only come to gather his belongings and make the official move back to the Dominican Republic, back to Puerto Plata. It was a city where he had met his wife and the city where his mistress lived. For the last few months, Lynette's father sporadically paid a woman named Agustina to clean and maintain the apartment. She lived on the 4th floor, and Lynette's grandmother had been her closest friend. Even so, Lynette noticed that the photos and knickknacks were still covered in a thin layer of dust. She practically raised me. She changed my diapers, her father said. Lynette knelt beside the coffee table, and it smelled of the wet rags Agustina must have used to wipe it down. She watched her father as he circled around the living room, shaking his head. When Agustina heard you were moving in, she started crying. She was so happy. She kept saying, Dios la bendiga, Dios la bendiga. 2. Rafaela was the girl who lived next door. Lynette met her on Sunday and sat cross-legged on her living room floor that same afternoon. The building was filled with the noise of trap music, which filtered through from the basement. When Lynette's father was a kid, those underground rooms were fallout shelters. Now boys lived in these converted corridors, providing the unsolicited soundtrack to the discordant atmosphere of Rafaela's apartment. Apartment 6F was designed to be identical to Lynette's. Although it seemed more spacious, Rafaela didn't have couches or chairs, but the largest wall of the living room was filled with mirrors of different shapes and sizes, at least half with cracks or missing fragments. It turned out there wasn't much food in the apartment, but Rafaela left out a can of Vienna sausage and a fork on the coffee table for Lynette. Rafaela recolored her red hair with dollar store dye. She did it barehanded, but used the plastic gloves that came in every box to wipe at lost drops with her foot. Her hands were flushed from the dye and its toxins. Although they were swollen, she insisted her hands didn't sting. Lynette's left leg fell asleep, but she liked the way Rafaela spoke in hushed tones and the way her dark curtains smothered the afternoon light. I only work in the evening, on weekdays for now, but I can probably meet someone there, you know? She spoke quickly, without pauses. Rafaela leaned forward, filling the gap between her and Lynette. She scratched at her damp scalp, and Lynette was almost certain that the dye should have been stripped from her hair a while ago. Have you ever been in love? Lynette found her own figure distorted in one of the full-length mirrors. In the dim light, her body seemed gray. Everything was just slightly shrunken, everything but her midsection, which protruded outward, bloated. I got the tattoo. I cover it up now, though, with makeup. I mean, he had a kid with another woman, could you imagine? A baby? Rafaela reached forward, accidentally bumping her arm against the table, disturbing the meat still soaking untouched in its can. She placed a hand on the soft middle of Lynette's stomach. The deep warmth of her inflamed fingers almost stung. A baby, she repeated. Could you imagine? 3. Lynette was surprised to find out that Valeria's laundromat was now a pharmacy. All the businesses along the block had been repurposed. The barbershop was now a hookah bar. Even the bodega on the corner now displayed an audacious yellow and red sign that read Food Corp. Lynette stood out on the street with her half-filled sack of clothes. She had left her apartment without combing her hair, and now she was conscious of her hot breath. She heard the distant droning of the one train, and suddenly the overpass looming above the street was greener than she remembered. She didn't like the new stale trees and bushes the city had planted along the sidewalks. She had liked the laundromat and the mothers, their dingy pale coats, nightgowns, and rollered hair. A group of young men sat huddled outside the apartment building in collapsible chairs. Lynette remembered how her grandmother had thought that the streets were no longer safe. Her grandmother could never recognize them, but Lynette's father always said that these were the sons, nephews, and little brothers of his childhood friends, of the boys she'd fed and welcomed into her home. Lynette tried to lessen her breathing as she passed them, clutching her laundry bag close to her body. She never heard them speaking, even when she knew their lips were moving, and some of these faces even looked familiar to her, but that only made it worse. 4. Lynette was lying on the living room carpet, her cheek pushed against dingy wool. The afternoon heat was nauseating, even as the ceiling fan convulsed overhead. She heard the faint clicks of a door unlocking, but it hadn't occurred to her to think it was her own. Mija, mija. A small woman stood at the doorway, carrying a pale yellow bucket. Me recuerdas, remember? Lynette rose to meet her halfway. The woman looked even smaller than she had from a distance. She looked up at her, eyes watery and wide, and leaned against Lynette. Soy Agustina. Lynette placed a light arm across Agustina's back and waited. Eventually, Agustina lifted her head and from Lynette's chest and wiped along the bags under her eyes. Stepping away, she shuffled to the kitchen table and emptied her sand bucket of its contents. A bottle of Fabuloso, grayed dish towels, and a spare set of keys she was never asked to return. She was in her 60s, but something about the neighborhood had deep effects on her generation. They were elderly without being old. Lynette noticed that all the aging faces she'd come across shared the same attributes: gray speckled eyes, serpentine fingers, dehydrated skin. She followed behind as Agustina cleaned from room to room. She wasn't fluent in Spanish, and Agustina seems conscious of this, offering English adjectives where she thought helpful. Que triste, sad, bad. Agustina held the rag against the window pane, allowing loose trails of water to escape down her forearm. She paused often to massage her wrists and took the time to remind Lynette of everything she should have already known about her. Agustina had never married. Her only son had died train surfing as a teen, and last year she fell from her kitchen table trying to replace a light bulb. Lynette also learned that Valeria closed the laundromat and moved to Harlem, that now she sold amateur cakes from an apartment. Her daughter had passed away a few months ago from anaphylactic shock after eating shrimp on her birthday. Agustina mentioned that the Catholic school closed down and that Isadora, Lynette's childhood friend, was now a mother of 2 girls. Lynette and Isadora had always played house in the school's parking lot during recess, huddling between cars to make a shelter for themselves. Isadora played the husband until she had to repeat the 2nd grade. Afterwards, the girls saw each other much less, and then Lynette moved upstate. Although she couldn't have grown much since Lynette had last seen her, Agustina described Isadora as a woman. Her figure, her body, su cuerpo, was strong and round, unmistakably that of a mother. The phrase stalled and lingered in Lynette's mind, su cuerpo. She reddened as Agustina drew comparisons between her and her former companion. Bellezas, Agustina insisted, pretty girls. 5. Everything good? The super was a short, stout man. He peered into the apartment over Lynette's shoulder, and Lynette could smell the bitter coffee on his breath. He raised his arm to scratch at his ear, and his hand grazed her nipple. He asked after her grandfather. He missed his poker friend. He had a habit of coming by a bit too early when Lynette was still in sleepwear, and her vision felt filmy. Last night, she had remembered to wear an extra layer to sleep, a wife beater underneath a white sleep shirt. The super always asked after the apartment, and each week seemed surprised that the washing machine was broken, that the sink still dripped. Today, he lingered. Lynette scraped at the door with her index finger, peeling away at black paint to uncover the maroon color she had forgotten from childhood. He told Lynette that Rafaela was gone. She had traveled by train from Manhattan to a suburb of Westchester in her bathrobe and entered the home of a young couple. Rafaela thought that the cat on their porch had sent her there. Whether it was a messenger or God wasn't clear, but she knew she had been brought to Scarsdale to take care of this infant. The nanny found her in the nursery, cradling the newborn against her exposed breast. Her mom isn't going to do shit with the porqueria Rafa left at her place, the super explained. Lynette thought Rafaela could have been given the benefit of the doubt. She had found a baby. Lynette wondered if the infant felt safe when Rafaela nursed it. 6. A couple moved into Rafaela's apartment. Lynette thought they were beautiful. She loved to catch glimpses into their living room, to take in modern furniture lined against bumpy off-white walls. The wife was visibly pregnant. Lynette noticed that when passing her in the hallway, the wife always kept her hand busy, either smoothing over her stomach or twisting at the ring on her left hand. They never spoke, yet the wife had a way of smiling that struck Lynette as impish or sly. On certain days, Lynette could even hear the muffled moans of the wife and the rattling of the couple's bed through the thin walls. And sometimes Lynette would synchronize her body to imagine movements, quietly mimicking the noises to herself. She often thought of the red stains Rafaela had left on the wooden floorboards that one Sunday afternoon. She figured the super wouldn't have bothered to remove them. 7. Lynette's father came over. He promised to fix the washing machine, but stayed for dinner. They decided to eat in the living room, ignoring that the cable box and TV were only ornamental. God, you're nothing like me. At your age, I was already living with your mom. She was probably already pregnant. We were just babies. He looked oversized, sitting against the stiff furniture, but his face and smile expressed a comfort Lynette couldn't comprehend. When her father left, the washing machine was still broken, and Lynette retched undigested peas and yellow rice into the kitchen sink. Her father had left the washer disassembled and pried from its place along the wall, but promised to come back next week. 8. Mija, cleaning, I clean. Lynette sat on the toilet much longer than necessary. She couldn't remember the last time she had showered. The ceiling just above the bathtub was bulging, heavy with the accumulation of moisture. Augustina tapped on the bathroom door. Mija, todo bien? Lynette moved to slowly step onto the ledge of the tub. From this position, the ceiling bubble was truly enormous. She didn't understand how it could have grown so fast and how she hadn't noticed. ¿Qué pasa? Lynette nudged one hand against the center of the bubble. It went soft and distorted under pressure, but remained intact. Augustina's voice seemed more distant now, subdued by her own knocking. Lynette's fingers scraped at soggy paint until a hole tore open, releasing a shaky stream of water that splattered against her chest. Even emptied of its contents, the bulge had mostly retained its shape, only now its dark cavity gawked at her from the ceiling. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Ooh, might as well use this. Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, New England Review, for having me tonight. Oh, there's my little baby. You might hear her making some little sounds as I read. Hi, sweetie. So I'm going to read some new stuff, but my book, which you can purchase in the back, is called The Chateau Witchman. It's a blockbuster in verse. And basically, the elevator pitch is imagine a hero story where you really don't like the hero. And his aspirations, even though they're vague, are sort of despicable from the get-go. And I actually had a roommate when I lived in Brooklyn who we called the Witchman. And I started writing this whole book as a kind of joke. Unrelated, but we are now no longer friends. And I just kept writing it. So this is the overture. The trees took off their clothes, rushed their fingers towards the Witchman. It's all mustard to me, he grinned, playing underdog with a swing full of gooseberries. The dog walk became a run. The playground, a field of impalpable statuary. The merry-go-round took a turn for the morose, and the Witchman made a face that many would attempt to carve likenesses of into the 100 inedible autumn gourds appearing on shelves as abruptly as the season changed and sexy referee costumes invaded our lives. The Witchman, uninterested by the human desire to know, infrequently had his nose in books, though much did he have his pen where he wrote, "Hello, I love you. Won't you tell me your name, address, date of birth, and social security number. The frieze of girls the witch man imagined holding grapefruits over their breasts, the scattering bluebirds, a contiguous wreck of nerves. Look up vehicular manslaughter in the dictionary, and you'll see a self-portrait of the witch man most satisfied that the sculptor refused to distinguish where the grapefruit began or where the breast ceased. The witch man milk bottle bowling, the surrendered leaves twice stilled since the last gust of wind had passed the almshouse, the tree house, the dog house, all pocked with the branches as shade. Otherwise, the whole stand of oak, stone pine, and purple ash resigned. The reeling earth allowed the witch man to stand upon her, stretch his arms, and crack another beer. So earlier, Carolyn had mentioned those movies, and I mentioned the Oedipus one because part of it is sort of like a Greek play in some ways. In this poem here, there's sort of a Greek chorus that jumps in. And what we're sort of starting to see is that this entire mysterious group is starting to mold the witch man's life for him, which is what he wants, but the TV flickered on, startling the witch man out of his thinking man pose. He couldn't tell how he got there, if he was beside or outside himself, or why every channel had nothing but a black screen and the thrum of a 3-male operatic choir. The witch man tried to mute the damn thing, but the voices rose out of various antique radios he at one time liked to collect. He picked up the phone to complain, but the voices were there too. He went to the closet to find a hammer or book suitable for smashing, but the voices came from all directions, filled every appliance in every house, and flooded the streets. So the witch man decided he had no choice but to sit back and listen. And he might as well watch, too. The witch man enjoyed staring into the black screen. It reminded him of when the world all around at once spoke to him. The screen flashed white, an American flag flapping in the wind. Then the voices in unison broke into speech. Before the worlds came to be, a pulse before the heart, both fire and sweetness. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the witch man. A street sweeper shoots down one side as the cars, one by one, return to their parking spaces. The voices return to a thrum, cut to the replay from the football game, the ball end over end sailing upwards until it is freeze-framed within the moon. The female choir again compelled to words. The moon is prior to gentleness and the sound of running waters. She lifts down the great fruit and lets the witch man speak for itself. Above the freshly reparked cars, a red and blue cyclone parallel to the ground rushes through the air. The crowd waiting at the bus stop scatters into nearby bars and shops. Those stuck in their cars crouch beneath steering wheels and cover their heads with their hands. The witch man stands prominent in the middle of the street, looks around dazed and smiles. The far-winged bluebirds sound out from the aviary double helix and cheer the witch man. The cardinals chip-chip with delight. Drowning the incessant drones of the choir, the birds whirlpool around the witch man, each cardinal intertwining with a bluebird, filling the streets with feathers, blinding the camera until all is again white. The American flag waves across the screen, and the songs of the birds are stilled in favor of the choir, who says, "The moon is prior to the boundaries of light, prior to the dust that settled into wisdom." She understands that the universe is a many-colored shroud, and trying to see through it goes against the current of the witch man. So that's the witch man. Things get worse for him. And that second book about the teenagers, I just have one poem from that. If you ever read any of the epic poems, they have those little paragraphs in the beginning where they kind of tell you what happens. I always enjoyed those sometimes more than the poems themselves. So this is one of those. It's from Book 3, Poverty of Speech. It's called The Argument. That's what those little sections are called. As the tide comes in with an excess that leaves few places to stand. It goes out, and the field before the water lies compact and barren in its openness. Where the fire and the water meet, the two resist each other to stay themselves. But in the space between, there's trouble. In remaining oneself without knowing what that may be. In finding the right words, and placing a body of water between oneself and the ones who dance by firelight until dawn. The trouble in wanting that heat. That one cannot speak to a crucial moment before it winds and unwinds into another. The fire from the party in the woods and the boat where one rows out into a still mind where nothing beckons, no stars or music or lovers. So I've got 3 more for you tonight, and they're all kind of downers. Just to prep you. The title of this one sets the mood. My mother's ashes are in the upstairs closet. My father said it was nice. Nice we had a chance to ask my mother what she wanted a week before she died. Service at the church, no funeral home. Asked Gail about the song about the Eagles. We never did. A simple meal. Bury me next to my first husband, but not until you're dead too, Rod. To mix our ashes. And then she pointed at me from the bed in the living room. Ghost bed I'd see long after it was removed, next to my father's white leather widower chair. From that quiet mouth of hell, she said to me, "You're in charge." I tried to stop him, but my father insisted on asking, "What do you want to be cremated in? The dress from Ben's wedding or the one from our renewal of vows?" Once home to the duck print sleeping bag and carpet cleaner, the closet where we placed my mother's ashes on the high shelf. So there's a fun little website called the Bureau of Linguistic Reality. You can actually go there yourself and do this, but it's like new words. You just like make up a word, you make a definition. And I was just looking there, and this word, the name of this poem is whirring, which comes for that in sight, and the definition is, when compost turns from smelling rank to sweet, of soil becoming fertile. In the duplex on Booth Street, a concrete brick building painted a ghosting yellow. The 5th grade teacher who taught down the hall from my mother brought a VHS tape to test my science knowledge for reasons never explained to me. Casement windows propped open and few cars down the gravel lane. The video begins with a stationary close-up, a view of vegetables so still one hardly notices the heirloom tomato tilting to its side, carrots thinning and browning out as the red, orange, and greens desiccate into the table, save stem ends, husks, and mold. Dr. Kosher stopped the tape and put on her quizzing voice to ask, "What did you just see?" How do they do it, those who make a sweetness out of death? Going back to the centuries-old graveyard by the church I grew up in, the grave of Lieutenant Isaac Brewer, 1742 to 1788, with an epitaph reading, "With gliding fire an evening star streaks the autumn skies. Shook from its seat, it darts away, and in an instant dies." It's growing dark. The old church parking lot still has the hoop with nothing but a backboard, and my mother isn't waiting for me here. I watched the drapery of her couch wrap about her. I saw her lie down. I saw the wind push her into a breathless, narrow house and then move through the graves and around me. If it were trying to say something, I understood it as much as my daughter stringing together syntax, tone, and nonsense, a various language turning, thinning, and decomposing until the earth again grows sweet. So this last one, indirectly, is an invitation for any of you who'd like to visit Goshen and see Rootstone's house. We're fixing it up, and we're going to be there pretty much every weekend until it gets too cold again. So this poem takes place there. Not far from here, about 45 minutes or so, in the Green Mountains. It's called Ghost Pipes. Oh, the fire's gone, because this line fits it. The fire didn't burn the trouble away. Just embers now. The shovel handle cooled to black. It feels good to arch one's back after a day of pulling 100-year-old nails until there is nothing but the sky and a few trees on the periphery. A hint of the auroras and darkness mostly. The stars dim and blue. The plastic chair cracks in half and you along with it. You fold into yourself until there's just the wind brought by a car a half-mile down the road and your voice before it finds the will to speak. None of it wants to hold much longer. The great blue heron spread out its wings and drifted, almost fell into the stream and just sort of stood there until we turned in for the night. What did it leave behind? Beyond the field that opens to a mountain of gutted pines and ghost pipes, river of rocks and fallen trees, where it too stretched its dagger-like bill skyward, moving slowly, striking with a speed reserved for the more conspicuous, lifting its two-tone wings into deep beats which cannot pull you from this reverie on death. How the good work won't slow it down. How it's only begun to pull the fish that pass it from the stream. The rest of the wood catches too fast. The ghost pipes, no red on these, so pale to be translucent, a calm parasite thriving in the understory. In the dark, it will take us. We are not prepared. Forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that good? Does that work? I always wanted to be tall.
It stays where it's supposed to be.
Okay. And does this go on? This seemed helpful. Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks. Okay. Thanks so much for coming, and thanks Ben and Layla and everybody at New England Review. It's great to be here. I'm going to be reading tonight from a short story, two scenes from a short story in my collection that is set in the fictional town of Stark Run, Vermont, which is loosely based on the Brattleboro area and some towns around there where I lived for 25 years. The story I'm going to be reading from is called Molly Sings the Blues. Molly cherishes an empty house and no one around for miles. She cranks up the scratchy Billie Holiday album on the old turntable in the den. In the kitchen, she grabs her broom, gripping the wooden handle like a microphone in the same way she clutched her hairbrush as a girl when she pretended to be Cher in front of the bathroom mirror. She slides into the living room, takes pleasures in sounds that slip around her body. Saxophone, piano, a brush stroking a drum, and the heady croon of Billy. They're all here, these sounds, all here to help Molly lose herself, or become more of who she wanted to be, or perhaps a little of both. She imagines her skin dark and silky, and the space around her a smoky nightclub. She leans in towards the broom, then away, mimicking the lilting rhythms. The word she thinks of, languid, the picture of herself, inches taller and pounds thinner. Trilling the shimmering melody, she slithers a hand up and down her hip and sachets across the pine wood floor. She lifts her chin, her eyelids close. Is it too late to learn how to sing, she wonders? To really sing, deep and throaty like Billy, the blues, to buy a piano, take lessons, make some strides to catch up this one life, to draw herself from the well, draw the wilderness out of the woman within the wife, the mother. Most days she plays the album, tucks her broom away, and then sits at the farm table to enjoy leftovers topped with ketchup on a crusty roll, a smidge more solitude before her tall, bright son, the youngest, breezes in from the career center. But today, as the last song winds down, a shadow movement in the front yard beckons her to the picture window. A young woman sits on the wooden swing hanging from the maple tree by the barn. She's brushing her hair. Molly squints in the sun, searching for an unfamiliar car in the driveway. There is none. Though the stranger looks harmless, harm has been done. The woman has seen her. She feels as if bugs are crawling on the inside of her clothes. A rush of red-winged blackbirds swoops and scatters. The woman stands. She's pregnant, bloated low on a thin frame. She wears pink leggings and a white t-shirt stretched and baggy below her knees. Molly wonders how far she walked in leather fashion boots. The woman flicks her wrist in a low wave, then stretches both arms above her head, arches her back. She slings an oversized handbag over her shoulder and approaches the kitchen porch. Up close, Molly recognizes her. Crystal Townsend. She was 15 the summer Jack hired her to help Molly on the family beach vacation in Maine, though Molly had told Jack she could look after her own kids. An experiment, Jack had said, to give Molly a chance to breathe. Some years ago, Molly heard that Crystal ended up in the Women's Detention Center for writing bad checks. There may have been a drug habit. It doesn't matter. What matters is how long the woman's been gawking through the window and why the hell she's here. Molly greets Crystal at the screen door. What else can she do? Crystal pets the rosemary in the hanging pot, spilling dirt on Molly's clean porch. I love that smell. I worked at a greenhouse once. The girl talks as if the two of them were in the middle of a conversation. You don't remember me, do you? Molly tightens the grip on her broom handle. Sure I do. You haven't changed so much. And in fact, she hasn't, thinks Molly. Although the woman would be about 33 by now, she looks like a young 20-something. Crystal laughs. Well, I'm not exactly the same. They both look down at the belly pressing up against the screen between them. Molly flushes. True. She remembers what Crystal looked like the summer of 1994. Her body long and soft, her greasy potato-brown hair, and how pale flesh had squished over the rim of the girl's pink string bikini like baby fat. In fact, Crystal had acted like a baby, some fuss about a dead crab, and Molly had to watch another kid, her 4 little ones, and the babysitter, until Jack put Crystal on a bus back to Vermont. It's been 18 years, almost exactly, Crystal says. Sky's 18. Molly bristles. She knows how old her son is. But Sky was born after that summer vacation, so how does Crystal know Sky? Is Sky around? Crystal asks. He promised to drive me to the birthing class up in Springfield. Sky said that? Molly steadies herself with her broom. She doesn't care for someone telling her something about one of her kids that she doesn't already know. I get what you're thinking. Crystal shifts her handbag to her other shoulder. Don't worry, the baby isn't his. Well, Molly hadn't thought that, is confused, and now feels relief. She musters the manners she was brought up with and had taught her kids. You can wait for Sky inside. In the house, Molly wonders if she should say something about the dancing, then tells herself it's best to pretend it didn't happen. Who cares what Crystal Townsend thinks? People do silly things every day. She returns the broom to the pantry and stands behind the counter of her kitchen island, places her palms on the cool soapstone moored by the familiar. Sit down. Molly gestures to the kitchen table. Do you want something to eat? Sure, I'm starving. Crystal circles her belly in small, jerky motions, but stands fixed near the porch door. Static from the speakers playing the end of the spinning record scratches the strained atmosphere. I'll just turn that off and be right back, says Molly. Alone in the den, she puts the record back in its sleeve, then looks up at the ceiling and stretches her tongue out as far as it will go, releasing the tension in her neck, a trick she learned from a yoga workshop. Molly looks through the window to the back pasture. Jeb, their old draft horse, paws the ground, grubbing for something green. Betty's tail switches at black flies. Molly tells herself to pause, to notice the moment. Sunlight runs pink across post-winter grass as if to soothe afternoon into evening. This is the kind of slowing down that Molly craves. Sky will be here soon to deal with Crystal, then Jack will appear, then supper, then the time when she can stretch out under the print quilt in the guest room where she goes to bed at night. She fills her lungs with a restorative breath. When Molly steps back into the kitchen, she finds Crystal standing in front of the open fridge, pinching vegetables right out of the roasting pan. Lord knows what kind of dirt and germs are now crawling around the pork loin she'd prepared earlier for her family's dinner. Sorry, Crystal mumbles, chewing. She shuts the refrigerator door, licks her fingers, and walks around the large open kitchen, picking up framed photos from a shelf with oily fingers and setting them down in the wrong places. Have a seat, Molly says in a firm tone. Jack calls it her manners and homework voice. I'll fix you some food. She sets out a loaf of warm bread and cheese. She crosses her arms, frowning while Crystal eats. Molly glances at the clock. How do you and Sky know each other? She asks. I thought you'd been away. From the Career Center, I do the books. I studied accounting in prison. She looks Molly directly in the eye as if challenging her to cast judgment, but Molly's raised 5 teenagers. She knows how to maintain a neutral face. Sky's a cutie pie, Crystal says. We have lunch sometimes. Good kid, but kind of a loner. Kind of a loner. What could Crystal possibly know about it? Sky's always been quiet. He likes to get his work done. Molly knows it sounds lame, like talk at a parent-teacher conference. She hasn't been paying attention to Sky in the same way she did with all the other kids when they were in high school. She feels tired most of the time, as if nestled in a soft, sticky cocoon, waiting for the next stage of her life, while other lives go on around her. Her solitude with Billie Holiday is the one time a day when she feels a stirring. It's when she glimpses possibility through a cracked door, a sliver of light shining in, and on the other side of the door, a mysterious gloaming. Crystal reaches into her handbag and pulls out a liter bottle of Diet Coke, uncaps it, and takes a long drink. Molly cringes. Would you like some water, or maybe a glass of milk? She watches Crystal's throat as she gulps down the soda like a turkey working on a grub. Molly raises her voice as if Crystal has a hearing problem. Milk from Sky's cow? Crystal sets the bottle down the table. White foam rises to the top. Yes, I know what milk is, but I'm fine. I don't like the stuff right from the cow. She reaches into her bag and pulls out a beat-up ukulele, plucks a string or two, and begins to play. You don't mind if I practice, do you? Go right ahead. Molly waves a hand as if flicking a fly. Crystal strums the out-of-tune instrument and sings in different keys, assaulting Molly's sensibilities while she does the dishes. Molly doesn't know what more she could possibly say to this woman. She's grateful when Sky's old truck pulls up to the back of the house. The door creaks as he slams it shut. Crystal stops strumming and stands. She rolls her shoulders. Molly tries not to stare at the dirty shirt stretched to display Crystal's swollen belly button. Sky walks in through the mudroom. "Hey, Mom." To Molly, he sounds surprised that she, his mother, is standing in her own kitchen instead of a grungy, pregnant woman. He glances at Crystal. "Hey, Crystal's been waiting for you." "I see that. You guys met." His head swings back and forth, looking at Crystal, then Molly, then Crystal. He's breathless and gleaming. Molly used to love the fresh feel of the house when Sky got home from school. Now he just seems worked up. "I thought we were meeting at the center," he says to Crystal. Crystal steps between Sky and Molly and cuffs him on the arm. "Sorry, I didn't go in today. Cramping." She fingers the base of her belly. "Does it still work for you to drive me?" She turns to Molly. "I'll pay for gas." "No, you won't," Sky says. "I said I'd take you." Sky looks at his watch. "Mom, does it work for you?" Molly is surprised to be included. She wonders how she is supposed to answer a question like that. "No, you're not allowed." Because why? Because your father wants you down at the hardware store? Because you're only 18 and this is not your problem? Because the whole world gets crazier by the minute and you will absolutely not become any part of it? Most days, Molly is eager for Sky's launch into an independent life. Today, she feels left standing on the edge of a precipice. "Check with your father. He wanted you to go with him to the meeting about the rummage sale." Her lips tighten. "Dinner's at 7. Molly watches from the kitchen window as her son carries Crystal's scruffy bag and ridiculous ukulele to his truck. She sees them climb inside the cab. Crystal laughs at some grand gesture Sky makes with his hands. Are they making fun of her? Sky reverses the pickup in the driveway, spinning gravel as he turns the truck around. Molly continues to watch the back of the old Ford until there's only dust in the road. She clears the table, smelling the inside of the half-empty soda bottle. It's sugary, like summer. She pours the thin liquid down the drain, listening to little bubbles hiss on the stainless steel, and then watches them pop and disappear. The years of mothering have been like that, Molly thinks, fizzy and then gone. Thank you.
Hi. Does it come up a little bit? I can just I can do this. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, you got it. Oh. Maybe there. That's good. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. How are you guys doing? It's been a lot of listening. That's great, though. I love this. I wanted to say thank you all for your patience and what an amazing audience tonight. And I wanted to say thank you to CAROLYN for putting this together and the NER group for being here and what lovely readings from Layla and Ben and Jodi. Gosh, I was so inside of it. I almost forgot I was reading afterwards. So I'm going to start off with a poem I just wrote yesterday. I thought I would be brave, and maybe you would be generous. And so those two things might go together. So I just wrote this yesterday. Listen. Like 100 gray ears, the river stones are layered in a pile near the shed where mourning doves slow their peck and bobble to listen to a chorus of listening. Small buds on the lilac perk up. A cardinal's torpedoed call comes in slow waves of 4, round after round. It's a love call, a call to make him know himself. The stones listen harder, decipher the song, attempt to offer back its echo, but fail. This is not a poem of spring. This is a poem well aware that gray flesh is dead flesh. All of the ripe listening comes at a cost. The first sky is in all skies. The first song is in all songs. Blue Morpho. There are days I go to the mailbox and find letters from my dead husband translating for me his suicide. The cold blade softened into cursive, his fear licked onto the stamp, as the return address the date of his death. I look forward to those letters. Some are addressed to my son. I collect and keep those. At times, this is a greedy act, but he is too young. I see myself asleep in my son's body, my eyes behind his eyes. But now I worry that there is distortion. Like Parmigianino's self-portrait in a convex mirror, his hand partly reaches out to me, partly curls back into itself. When I was a girl, my uncle mailed to me framed collections of mounted butterflies. Blue Morpho, Tiger Wing, Malachite, Moon Satyr. These are all names my husband could take now. I imagine him as Goldman's Ulysses or the great Eurybia. I know that to kill a butterfly, you use a killing jar. Because they are so fragile, sometimes butterflies batter themselves in the killing jar. At night, this makes me wonder about the mixing spoons in the bowl, the tangles of the dough, the small temporary fight. For a clean kill, it is better to first stun a butterfly by pinching its thorax. You must practice to get this method right, so it is recommended to try it on common moths or butterflies you are not concerned about. Pinch smartly between your finger and thumb, like tweezing a piece of sky. Honing. A sharp knife is a safe knife. There is a difference between honing a knife and sharpening it. The metal rod that stands in the center of my knife block only hones. I can hone my skills, perfect them over time. I might hone granite, hone my French, hone rock climbing and love making. When I sharpen an edge, I grind away at the metal blade. The stainless steel burrs become smooth, like a trained voice, or like following the rules. But after his suicide, I collected all the blades from the kitchen. I admired the heft of the chef's knife, the balance of the tang. It only takes a 20-degree angle to sharpen the length of a blade. The day he died, I sliced a loaf of bread, some cheese to sit out, waiting for a return to never come. Where did I think all the blood came from? To hone is to recenter the blade. To sharpen is to animate the wind. I wrote this next poem almost exactly a year ago. The title is Directions for My Son on his 19th birthday, and so he just turned 20 last week, so it's it's a nice little anniversary poem. And birthday poem, I guess. Directions for my son on his 19th birthday. I cup my hands to hold your youth. I try to show you how to do the same. It takes decades of practice to get this right, and by then, it is always too late. Yesterday, a man stabbed a homeless man on Church Street. At dinner, we tucked this story between bites of salmon, pieces of song by Fleetwood Mac, melting from the speaker. It rained all day today. I told you that I always thought I'd have another baby. In truth, I knew I was only good for one. No matter how hard you press the outer edges of your palms and pinkies together, they will always leak. You should know that you can't hold water in your palm for long. Don't put yourself in a spot where you might have to carry all you'll need. At dusk, we count 4 rabbits on the back lawn, and I consider if it's a sign, only to watch the stalking feral tabby turn them into humble bronze, heavy and frozen and hopefully downwind. At least once a year, you should close your cupped hands like a book. Not to worry, hinged, they always open again. So I'm in Vermont 2 years, and I moved up from Florida, and I love writing about the natural world of Vermont. I do. I find it it's like a new discovery for me in a lot of ways. I did teach for many years in Florida also, and so this next poem that I'm going to read is dedicated to a student of mine who, and this poem is what is in the latest journal, the NER and New England Review, and a student of mine who was killed, murdered in a murder-suicide with her partner. It's titled "The Burning Bush," for Brianne Ort. An entire alphabet can be stuttered in a few gunshots. So often it's the boyfriend spiraling down the chamber, his words lodged in the barrel behind the bullet, fast and frenzied. We all wonder why the trash at the dump never stops burning, why the blind look to the wind. The rain stumbles outside the window, the tombe before the heavy pas de bourrée of storm. Cathedral de San Marco in Venice speaks 2 languages, Greek and Latin. And I am jealous of those with 2 tongues, like the white pine whose trunk cracks and whose needles whistle to the bilingual nuthatch. The sun torches the tip of trees on a descent from a world where no woman is safe. Even the man who loved her wanted her dead. The burning bush is an invasive species, yet cardinals and chickadees flock to its red seeds and flamed leaves in the fall. I should cut it to a stump and rot its roots, but instead I admire its show of color, watching the damage as it spreads. I feel like I'm ignoring you guys over here from the light. So my next poem is it's a form. It's called a golden shovel. And for those of you who might not know what a golden shovel is, it's where you take a line from Gwendolyn Brooks and you use a line from one of her poems, and each word becomes the last line of your lines. So the last word in each of my lines, if I just read them straight down, would read, because I always like reading that so you guys can hear it first and then you can maybe look for it. When we speak to each other, our voices are our voices are a little gruff. That's the line. When we speak to each other, our voices are a little gruff. And I think Terrence Hayes is who originated this form, if you will. And so the title is Golden Shovel Buddha. A warrior I am not, even when I try my hardest. I am a disciple of we, a follower of union, and I speak clearly of the rickshaw of love to anyone who will listen. Each of us must come to the edge of the other, either in this life or the next. Ours is a marriage sifted from mistakes and old voices, ticked like a wristwatch. A reminder we are on a well-worn path, king-sized and cherry, like a carved Buddha reclining in a gift shop window whose little hands are like all hands, full of patience and a little gruff. So I have two last poems I'll read, and it explains. Art often finds its way in my work, and I just fell in love recently with the moon jar. I don't know if the Korean moon jar specifically. I don't know if anyone knows about this. It was really popular during the 17th and 18th centuries, and what people loved about it were its imperfections that occurred during its making. And so, because of that, I'm in love with that. That was a desire, the desirable imperfection. So, I just discovered this. I was like, where was this all my life? Of course, So, the moon jar I had to write a poem about it. So, moon jar. My wedding ring is missing one small diamond, and I like it that way. A reminder of the imperfect in all of us, like that keyhole size of grief that remains crystalline. In Korea, ceramicists for centuries have made moon jars, testimony to the virtue of modesty, asymmetrical warping at the wheel, slumping in the pine-heated kiln, impurities when fired, black dots and pocks on its surface like freckles on skin. I have been kept awake so many nights by the moon, its pull on the pines and night birds, and who, like a monk, keeps a sharp order of time. Never a perfect sphere, the milky moon jar joins two clay hemispheres into one. When the light of the moon finds me, I am the color of everything in the winter night. And the last poem is also the poem that I have on the broadside that I had. My books due out in like a year, so I thought I'd have something in the interim. So I have a broadside that's back there for sale. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for a really lovely night, truly. And I'll finish with this. Signs for the living. Sometimes, after the last snow in May, after the red-winged blackbird clutches the spine of a cattail, after he leans forward, droops his wings, and flashes his epaulets, I imagine shouldering the yellow center lines of the road. Near the recently thawed pond, within a long channel of construction, a man holding a sign. One side says slow, the other stop. Joy and sorrow always run like parallel lines. Inside the house, when I leave the lights on, small white moths come like a collection of worship, pulsing their wings up and up the window, as if in a frenzied trance-like dance, some dervishes, others the penitent on shaky knees. The first few years after my husband's suicide, I wanted to be the penitent. I thought I deserved all the pain I could feel. The drill of roadwork in late summer was a welcome grinding music. Now, the yellow center lines are flung like braids behind me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Didi and Jodi and Layla and Ben for reading to us tonight. And everybody go out and enjoy yourselves and get some books. They're right there, and broadsides. Thanks again.